I know once she gets here, she'll be here soon. Hope you guys liked the stories. Did you enjoy it? Hope you all enjoyed it and have fun. And I will see you over at Carolyn's whenever she goes live tonight. Okay? I'm going to do Johnny Depp. Yep. So you guys have a great night. And a lovely evening, a great afternoon, a lovely morning with birds, the sun shining. Please, everyone, try to be on time next time. Okay? You were all late. I'm finished. Okay? Nothing I can do about it. You didn't get here on time. I don't know what to say. You know me. I'm just trying to be funny. Okay? We'll just read till Carolyn comes live, okay? Hi, Mary. Hi, Tiny Titan. I know who you are. Margot, Monica, Denise, Moo, Mary, One Eye, Nelson. Call you Nelson. Kathy. There we go. Mary. Okay, we're going with the spooky ones, okay? Because somebody said yesterday, I want your spooky story. So that's what we're going to do, okay? Right now. I've got it on my Kindle. Okay. Let's see. Trying to get to where we were. Okay. Now we're on, this doesn't seem right, but it's got to be right. Yeah, because I have it bookmarked here. Hi, Denise Cormier. Hi, A Heart Made Wise. Hi, Jackie Burns. Remember, y'all, let me know if Mama Caroline, see, I didn't say anything else. I was nice. If she goes live, she knows that I'm going live. She was just getting in the shower when she got off the live. I had to tell her that I was just joking about the gifts, and I was happy that she liked them. Very happy. Okay, these are the spooky tale or spooky campfire tales, remember? This is chapter 3, Sacks Covered Bridge. I don't know what exactly draws me back to Sacks Covered Bridge each time I visit Gettysburg. I just know that I feel compelled to drive there and take pictures. Of course, it's a beautiful spot, a covered bridge that was used by the Confederate Army to cross the creek when they withdrew from Gettysburg. But how many pictures can you take of the same place? Well, okay, if you're a photographer, that's a silly question. Hundreds in all weather, seasons, and lighting. Let me get this to set it on. But really, I'm only an amateur photographer. So why I personally felt compelled to take so many pictures of the bridge was a mystery about which my boyfriend was obsessing as he drove through the darkening countryside one evening in the late fall. You've visited this bridge about 100 times already, he complained, rounding a bend at full speed. But you've never seen it, I countered. Could somebody who has Davita's messenger let her know? I forgot to let her know. I feel bad. And I was out at the stores when she went live today doing her salsa, but I gotta watch that. But you've never seen it, I countered. Come on, honey, I'm hungry, he said. We can see it tomorrow or the next time we visit Gettysburg. No bridge, no dinner, I told him crisply. Visiting Sachs Covered Bridge was part of my Gettysburg tradition, and that was that. Besides, the bridge was supposed to be haunted, and that was definitely part of its draw for me. You never knew what might happen on a haunted bridge. According to legend, 3 Confederate soldiers convicted of being spies, did I read this? Were hanged from beams in the covered bridge, and their bodies were discovered by Union soldiers patrolling the area. Their spirits were still said to haunt the bridge, especially at night. Other folks claim they sometimes smelled General Lee smoking his pipe when they were standing on Sachs Covered Bridge. I'd actually smelled pipe smoke there once myself, and that was one of the reasons. There you go, Davita. I was just asking somebody to message you. And I can't wait to watch your making salsa video. I was at the store when you were doing that. Looks good. As we approached the bridge, a chill blasted over my skin, in spite of the warmth flowing into the car from the heater. The bridge, usually a friendly spot, seemed sinister and dark this evening. My stomach turned over, and I swallowed back the nausea. I felt as if there was a foul presence on the bridge that didn't want us to intrude there. I changed my mind, I said quickly, as my boyfriend stopped the car. Thanks, Auntie Cuckoo. Sorry, guys. I don't want to take pictures here after all. What? My boyfriend practically screeched, staring at me in amazement. After you made such a big fuss about it, after you forced me to look at every single solitary bridge picture you ever took of this bridge before we came to Gettysburg, no way, honey. I could be back at the hotel eating dinner and drinking beer right now. But no, we had to come to the bridge. Out you go to take your photos. He was right, I guess. It was silly to come all this way and not take the pictures, but I was utterly terrified to step out onto the bridge. My hand shook as I reached for the door handle, and it shook again as I secured my camera, praying with all my might that whatever dark power was out there would leave me alone. I leapt out the door and aimed my camera practically at random down the length of the bridge, which was which was completely empty of everything but me and the car as I took several snapshots. But I could feel someone, a very nasty someone, standing right behind me, willing me to leave or die. The presence throbbed at me in an almost physical way, and my skin crawled desperately. I didn't dare turn around. I couldn't. I just whirled my camera around, aimed it over my shoulder, and snapped a picture fast. Then I leapt back into the car before whoever or whatever decided to grab me. I gasped, "Get me out of here now." My boyfriend took one look at my white face and terror filled eyes and got me out of there. I didn't stop shaking until we were safe in our hotel room for the night. When I loaded the digital pictures onto my laptop computer the next morning, I went immediately to the pictures of the Saks covered bridge, unsure of what I would see. In the first photo, a little boy in period costume stood on an arm's length away from the camera. He was glaring at me with a twisted little face and an evil grin. He certainly hadn't been there when I took the picture, yet he looked solid enough to be real. The second photo was filled with misty figures that looked like phantoms. Creepy. I shuddered as I looked at them and quickly put the next photo, the one I had taken, over my shoulder without turning around. I gave a shriek of fear that brought my boyfriend crashing into the room. "What is it?" he shouted, and I pointed a shaking finger at the screen of the laptop. Pictured on it was a filmy, dark figure, half human, half beast, with blazing orange eyes filled with such menace and hatred that it made my stomach roil. He appeared so close to the camera that he must have been directly behind me. He looked like the devil. Yeah, that'd be a little creepy. My boyfriend's eyes widened and he gasped. Boy, they like that word gasp. "Delete it. Delete it now." But how could I delete it? I had captured pictures of ghosts on my camera. Was it worth the fright I'd had? I still wasn't sure about that. Still, I couldn't delete them. My boyfriend refused to look at the photos again, and he swore never to take me back to Saks Covered Bridge. But I may go back there someday myself. Okay, lady, have fun. Chapter 4: The Whirlwind. In hindsight, I suppose it wasn't a good idea to go ancestor hunting in the local cemetery at dusk, but that's when my friends and I got the notion. So off we went as soon as we thought of it. My mother had told me we had kin in the cemetery, but I'd never gone there before. We got on our bikes and skimmed expertly through the tourists who thronged the streets of Key West in the winter. Ooh, Key West. It was getting dark when we turned up the street where the church and cemetery stood. It was shadowy and mysterious. I shivered in delight and sped up the road, leaving my friends behind. They shouted and pedaled hard until the three of us rode abreast. We skidded to a halt by the church and parked our bikes by the cemetery gate. "This is a pretty spooky place," my friend Amanda said uneasily, brushing blonde hair nervously from her forehead. This was true, but I decided to ignore the fact. Amanda was a bit of a scaredy cat. If we acknowledged her fear in any way, she'd turn and run. So Terry and I ignored her comment as we slipped through the gate and made our way through the rows of headstones. Around us, the shadows grew longer and darker as we started reading surnames, trying to locate my kin. The Spanish moss dripping from oak tree branches overhead thrashed like writhing snakes in the sea breeze, reminding me a bit of the tale of Medusa. I shivered a bit and then scolded myself for being a scaredy cat like Amanda. "Here's one," Terry called, beckoning me to a rather dilapidated old tomb. I wandered over to take a look. By now, the sky had grown so dim that I had to plaster my face up against the stone to read it. The dates looked correct. This may be one of my great-grandparents, I said, straightening. I could barely see Amanda, who was in another aisle of the tombstones. A chill breeze sprang up, whipping the hair from my neck and making goosebumps rise on my arms. It really was spooky here. "We need a flashlight," I said to Terry, who was trying to read the grave next to my grandparents' tomb. "Suzanne," Amanda called my name suddenly. I looked over at her and gasped, my body freezing in disbelief. One little sip. I'm sorry, I gotta answer this. Okay. A whirlwind full of dead leaves and dust was blowing up from the ground in front of Amanda. She staggered backward, desperately trying to get away from it, her hair and clothes whipping about from the ferocity of the breeze it created. A sepulchral voice rose out of the whirlwind, roaring wordlessly in rage. The sound rose in pitch, higher and higher, until my brown curls stood on end. Beside me, Terry shouted in panic and ran toward the cemetery gates. "Come on," she called over her shoulder to Amanda and me. I forced my legs into action, sprinting after Terry. But when I glanced back, I saw that Amanda had tripped over a low tombstone and lay directly in the path of the shrieking whirlwind. I raced back and grabbed her arm, trying to get her moving again. Amanda gasped and scrambled upright, but fear made her clumsy, and she fell again over a jagged stone, cutting her knee open. The blood that spurted from the cut was suddenly illuminated by a bluish light that appeared directly above the whirlwind. It coalesced rapidly into a glowing man in the garb of an old-time Spanish settler. The spirit gave a shout of rage at the sight of me and Amanda and swooped towards us, arms outstretched. Just so you guys know, I have illustrated all these pictures. These are my illustrations. I didn't want to brag, but you know. Amanda gave a shriek and found her feet at last, racing away from the ghost, so fast that she left me far behind. I sprinted after her, my way uncannily lit by the glowing phantom behind me. The air around me was so ice cold that it made my lungs ache as I ran. Hi, Element. I leapt over a large tombstone that stood between me and the gate. Amanda and Terry were already on their bikes. "Hurry, Susan, hurry," Terry shouted. I raced through the gates and stumbled into my bike, knocking it over. As I grabbed it off the ground, I risked a backward glance and saw the phantom hovering just inside the gate, the whirlwind somehow mixed up with his glowing form. Dust whipped into my face as I jumped onto my bike and followed my fleeing friends. By the time we reached the end of the street, the phantom had vanished and the whirlwind had died away. We kept going. Terry's house was closest, so we rode there and collapsed on her porch, panting. "There is no way I'm ever going back to that cemetery," Amanda gasped. "What was that thing?" I shook my head, but Terry said, "I heard that the ghost of the man who single-handedly drove all the pirates out of Key West haunts the cemetery, but I thought it was just a myth. You know, one of the stories you tell tourists to freak them out." "Worked for me," I jibed. "I am completely freaked." Beside me, Amanda groaned in agreement and poked gently at her bloody leg. Terry blinked, realizing for the first time that Amanda was wounded. We hustled her inside the house to clean up her knee. "Hello, Aaliyah. This is the Whirlwind." It's a bunch of short stories, just different stories. Then I rode home with her because she refused to go anywhere alone. I couldn't blame her. Thank you, Aaliyah. I like your name. Thank you so much. And this is the only channel that you can get on YouTube tonight, I bet. And that's great. I love it. I'll try to make it exciting. We're here. It was completely dark when I headed back to my house. I stayed on the main roads, trying to keep out of the shadows. In my mind, I kept seeing the glowing figure swooping at me and feeling the supernatural coldness piercing my lungs. I decided then and there that I'd had enough ancestor hunting. From now on, I would stay away from that graveyard. That one wasn't, that great, right? Oh, Lex? Yeah. That just reminds me, I saw on my news feed that Jared Padalecki was in a very bad car accident. Yeah. And Jensen was, saying prayers and giving him best wishes. I'm sure he's going to be okay, though. I mean, it didn't say anything about his condition, Yeah. Haunted Tower. My great uncle Powhatan was once a colonel in the Confederate Army until he was injured in battle in 1864. Well, thank you, Aaliyah. Uncle Pow was shot in the head, Mama told my twin brother Frank and me when we were little. His mother nursed him right here on the plantation. She brought him through alive when everyone thought he was dead. But when he woke from his coma, he had no memory of his life before. He didn't even know his own mother. The head injury left him a bit simple, so you must be very kind to old Uncle Pow. That reminds me, I had an Uncle Poss. Pop. They called him P-O-S-S, Poss, down in southern Illinois. They said he was a hermit, lived out in the woods. Poss. I think I did see him once from a distance when I was a little kid. And he seemed super old. Uncle Pow told the best stories in the world, and he was stronger than a team of oxen. He towered over us, 6 feet 6 inches in his bare feet, and loved to swing us around. He never remembered much of what happened on any given day, but that never bothered us. The adults treated Uncle Pow as if he were touched in the head, but to Frank and me, Uncle Pow was a war hero, and we were immensely proud of him. Each summer, Uncle Pow took us fishing on the river, and when we were 12, he helped us build a fort in the woods near the ruins of the haunted shot tower. Technically, we weren't supposed to go near the shot tower, which was dangerously decrepit and half sunken into the ground, its door long buried beneath soil and creepers. But Frank and I loved visiting the tower because it was said to be haunted by the spirit of a woman who wept and clawed at the walls, begging for someone to let her out. Ooh, excuse me. It gave us shivers every time we looked at the tower. We talked about visiting it at night to see if we could see the ghost. Look at that. Oh, that's creepy, isn't it? That's a big tower for that little tiny house. Before we could try it, Mama found out about our fort and scolded us fiercely for disobeying her and dragging poor, simple Uncle Pow into our illicit schemes. It's dishonorable to take advantage of an old man who can't remember things because of a head injury, she said. I'm ashamed of you boys. As punishment, she gave us extra chores for an entire month. Frank was flattened by Mama's words. We'd been dishonorable. We'd taken advantage of Uncle Pow's head injury. It was a hard condemnation to bear. I'm going to become a brain doctor and fix Uncle Pow's head so he remembers everything he forgot, Frank told me at the end of our 12th summer. Light-hearted Frank was so serious that I believed him at once. True to his word, Frank studied hard and got into a famous university. He studied some more and got into medical school. Then he went to Europe to study with a famous brain surgeon and learned everything that science could teach him about the brain. Almost 50 years to the day after Uncle Pow was brought home to the plantation with the wound that shattered his skull and his wits, Frank came home from his sojourn in Europe and told the family that he could heal Uncle Powhatan. Thank you, Davida. I wrote all these too. Just saying, you know. It's a very simple surgery, Frank told the gathered family. 6 times out of 10, the person's memory is completely restored. We were dubious. Uncle Pow was happy as he was. Wouldn't it be kinder to let things be after all this time? All the people he'd known and loved 50 years ago were long gone now, but Frank was adamant. He'd spent his life studying medicine so he could help Uncle Pow. No one would stand between him and his goal, and no one did. Uncle Pow was brought to the hospital, where he beamed proudly at his great-nephew, the doctor, and told the nurses lovely stories about the animals he cared for on the plantation. No one could have been happier going into surgery than great Uncle Powhatan. Frank and I were both beside him when the old man woke after the surgery. He blinked hazily and stared from face to familiar face, a pucker between his eyebrows. Where am I? Where am I? He snapped briskly after inspecting us for a long moment. What is this place? It was the voice of a stranger. Gone was the happy smile. the languid tone. His voice was deeper, with the authoritative tone of a colonel. "Where are my men?" Uncle Pow demanded. "Did we win the battle?" Ooh, that's creepy, isn't it? He gasped, there we go again, suddenly, and struggled to sit up. "Annabelle! I must rescue Annabelle. She's all alone in the tower." Alarmed, we pushed Uncle Pow back onto the bed. Frank said, "It's us, Uncle Powhatan, Frank and Tom. Remember? We're your great nephews." "Don't talk nonsense. I have no nephews. My sister is an infant," the old man cried. He thrashed about so fiercely that he knocked both of us to the floor. As the nurse came running with a sedative, Frank and I stared at each other in horror. Uncle Pow didn't remember us. His past had returned in full, but he retained no knowledge of anything that had occurred after his accident. The old man calmed under the sedative, but not for long. When it wore off, he began thrashing again, crying, "Annabelle, my wife, Annabelle, you must help her." Frank and I stared at each other again, this time in consternation. Great Uncle Powhatan was married? I'd known him all my life, and no one had mentioned a wife. For 3 days, the old man thrashed and screamed whenever he came out of sedation. No one could calm him, and he recognized none of his family. That's given me the goosebumps, kind of, you know? Uncle Pow grew weaker each time he regained consciousness, and it was soon apparent that the old man was dying in great agony of mind and spirit. Frank's agony was as great as that of the old man he had spent his whole life trying to help. Hoping his home environment might ease his suffering, Frank brought Uncle Pow to the plantation, where Mama and I shared the burden of caring for the old man in his last days. Frank and I were with Uncle Pow when he woke on the 4th afternoon after the surgery. As consciousness approached, Uncle Pow's face contorted with pain, and his right hand crept to his head to claw futilely at the bandage. A spasm of remorse crossed Frank's face as he clutched Uncle Pow's hand and begged him to rest. Uncle Pow's eyes shot open when he heard Frank's voice. Taking in his white coat and air of authority, Uncle Powhatan pulled Frank close to him. "Listen to me, doctor," he gasped. There we go again, gasp. "I am dying, and there isn't much time. I'm a colonel in the Confederate Army. I was given a few hours leave between battles to go to church and marry my sweetheart Annabelle, who lived in the town where our division was camped. We met at the church. Annabelle was wearing a blue silk wedding gown, and I was all slicked up in my best Confederate uniform. After the wedding, we went down to the river with a picnic lunch for a few hours of honeymooning before I was due back at my camp. Suddenly, we heard a terrible blast from the woods in front of us. Annabelle thought it was an approaching thunderstorm, but I knew the sound of cannon fire. The Yankees were attacking my base camp. The old man fell back on the pillows, gasping for breath. Uncle Pow coughed repeatedly, and blood leaked from the corner of his mouth when he spoke again. "I had to get back to my men, but I couldn't abandon my new wife. The battle was almost upon us when I thought of the old shot tower. Acrid smoke stung our nostrils, and bullets winged through the air as we ran across the meadow." The old man fell silent a moment, eyes fixed on some spot over Frank's shoulder, his face a rictus of remembered terror. "There was a dry cistern in the tower. I lowered Annabelle into it using an old rope. I will be back in a few hours, my dearest love, as soon as the soldiers are gone," I told my Annabelle. Then I covered the cistern with the stone lid, leaving my wife excuse me, leaving my wife alone in pitch blackness, and ran back into the woods, hoping to rejoin my company and defeat the Yankees before they found my bride's hiding place. I must have been shot as soon as I left the tower, because the next thing I remember is waking up in this hospital. The old man's eyes focused suddenly on Frank's face. You can pick it up from here, Meg. It's just short stories. LMN. um, the old man's eyes focused suddenly on Frank's face. It's been days since I left Annabelle in that black cistern, he cried. There was no food or water down there. Please, you must go to her. You must rescue her. Run, boy. Go now. That's sad, isn't it? Uncle Pow's body arched in a sudden seizure, and a moment later he fell dead against the bedclothes. Frank stared at the old man's corpse in horror. Then he ran. He had to. The force of the old man's last words thrust him out the door and down the stairs before conscious thought kicked in. I followed as compelled by the old man's story as Frank appeared to be. We did not slow when we reached the tool shed, even knowing that whatever had happened to Annabelle had happened long ago. Frank threw hammers and saws and lumber out of his way, frantically searching for a shovel. I'm sure someone heard her cries and let her out, I said to Frank, as he grimly thrust a pickaxe at me. Frank grabbed a shovel for himself and raced away without answering, galloping down the river path that led to our childhood fort. I followed at a run, remembering all the stories I had heard about the haunted tower. Folks said the ghost became very active during a thunderstorm, screaming and scratching and begging for help. And Uncle Pow had said that Annabelle mistook the cannon fire for an approaching thunderstorm. Oh, dear God, was Uncle Pow's wife the origin of the ghost story? Frank reached the dilapidated tower ahead of me. He started shoveling around the half-buried door as I attacked the hardened turf with my pickaxe. When the sunken door was revealed, Frank kicked his way through the rotted wood and grimly tore away miles of rustling dead vines that hid the stone cover in the floor. It took all our combined strength to lift the cover, and I marveled that a young Uncle Pow had moved it alone. Tina Bina. As we opened the pit, we were overwhelmed by the smell of musty old air and perfumed decay. A ray of golden light came from the setting sun, pierced through the shattered remains of the tattered door, and shone into the cistern at our feet. I stared in horror at the huddled heap of bones and blue silk, which was all that remained of my great-aunt Annabelle. There were deep vertical gouges in the wall above her skull, where she's tried to claw her way out of the black pit, and a golden wedding band gleamed on the bones of one hand. Oh, that was a good one, right? I remember. Hi, Nicole. Creepy, right? Remember, Carolyn goes live. Let me know. I don't know if she has it scheduled yet. Chapter 6, The Ghost Cap. Ghost's cap. Ghost's? Ghosts. A full moon hung in the star-speckled sky as Anya climbed out her second-story bedroom window into the cold autumn night and shimmied down the bare oak tree. This chilly air didn't bother her. She was on the way to the graveyard to win a bet against the supercilious Ivan and his annoying little sister. The prosperous children of a local farmer, Ivan and his sister often took pleasure in teasing Anya about her worn clothing and old boots. But this time, the joke was on them. Ivan had bet the fancy silver buttons from his best coat and a yard of handmade lace from his sister's petticoat if Anya could learn the name of the ghost that sat on a tombstone in the local cemetery from midnight until dawn each night. Because Anya didn't believe in ghosts, she was going to invent some nonsense to tell the gullible Ivan and his sister. But first, she must walk to the graveyard past Ivan's house. She knew they wouldn't believe her story unless they witnessed her nighttime journey firsthand. Let me get another sip. I'm heart made wise. Me too. Yeah, every once in a while they'll have a good one, right? Let's see if I can. A wild wind shook the treetops as Anya stalked past Ivan's house. She made certain her face was clearly visible under the street lamp, knowing that Ivan and his sister were watching from the window to see if she was brave enough to take them up on their bet. At the gate to the cemetery, Anya paused uncertainly, seeing a white figure sitting on a gravestone, partway down one narrow aisle. The wind moaned around her, and she clutched her shawl close, shivering in the cold air. Then she realized the white figure must be Ivan, trying to trick her into believing there really was a ghost in the cemetery. Really, that boy. It was time someone taught him a lesson. Oh, that's kind of cool, though, Aaliyah. I wouldn't mind that. Anya pulled open the gate and stalked down the narrow passage between the gravestones until she stood in front of the white figure. Ivan had obviously taken some trouble with his disguise. The old man seated on the gravestone had his hands folded in his lap, and his white clothes glowed in the moonlight. His wrinkled skin was corpse gray. There were dark rings around the cavernous dark eyes, and he wore a white cap, just like the one Ivan had described. That cap annoyed Anya. Whoever heard of a ghost wearing a cap? She reached out and pulled the moldering covering off the white figure's head, crying, "You don't frighten me. You're not a corpse. You are a saucy boy who just lost all his silver buttons to me." With that, she danced away between the tombs, waving the moldy white cap triumphantly above her head. When Anya got home, she tucked the cap under her arm, nose wrinkling from the musty smell of decay, and climbed back up the tree to her window. She threw the moldering white cap through the window into the darkest corner of her room and slid in after it. Closing the window against the cold air, Anya slipped into her nightdress and went to bed. She didn't hear the wind pick up shortly after she fell asleep, nor did she see a white figure floating outside the window, peering in at the glowing white cap in the corner of the room. Give me back my cap, the figure called, tapping the glass with a shimmering finger. Give me back my cap. I don't think he sounded like that, but Anya turned over in bed and covered her head with the pillow, ignoring the tapping sound at the window. It's just the branches of the oak tree, she told herself sleepily. Let's see. Where are we? Give me back my cap, the figure called again. It rattled the window with a decaying hand as Anya snuggled deep into the covers. Give me back my cap. The wind gusted against the house, shaking it from top to bottom, but Anya slept on. Right? My cap, howled the floating ghost. Its cry was taken up by the autumn wind and blown all over the village, making dogs howl and cats yowl and the good farm folk shiver in their beds. But Anya did not stir. She knew there was no such thing as ghosts. Dawn came and the glowing figure vanished with a frustrated pop. In the dusty corner of Anya's bedroom, the ghostly light faded from the white cap. After breakfast, Anya went to Ivan's house to collect her bet. I went to their graveyard, she said, and I met the ghost of old Peter. He gave me his hat as proof. Hi, Amy Lawyer. Hi, Video Reel. Oh, good, Tina. Good. That's what we want. Yes, a little thief. Ivan stared glumly at the decrepit white cap, which was filled with grave must and mold. Sadly, he cut the silver buttons from his fine coat, and his sister removed the expensive lace from her petticoat. They gave their prized items to Anya, who danced triumphantly, away with the buttons and lace in her pocket, and the foul white cap on top of her yellow curls. Oh, yeah, that'd be nice. Sure. Yeah, Meg, that'd be great. I'd love that. On her way home, Anya grabbed the smelly cap from her head and threw it into the river. Good riddance to bad rubbish, she called, as it sank beneath an eddy. Honestly, who ever heard of a ghost wearing a cap? That night, Anya stayed up late, sewing silver buttons on her coat and trimming her petticoat with lace. Then she bade her parents a cheerful good night and went to bed. Just before dawn, the wind howled and slammed into the old house, rattling every window and shaking every door. Give me back my cap, a white figure roared, hovering beside the oak tree. Give me back my cap. But Anya slept on, dreaming of her new silver buttons and lace. In the next bedroom, her parents woke in fear, hearing the ghostly voice howling like thunder just outside their house. Give me back my cap, the floating figure shouted in rage. The wind slammed the shutters again and again. The air in the bedroom grew so cold it burned the nostrils and made the parents' breath crystallize into a fog around their heads. The figure hovering outside glowed with an eerie blue light white that illuminated every corner of their room. "What is that thing?" screamed the mother, hiding beneath the covers. Trembling from head to foot, the father stumbled to the window and shouted, "In the name of God, tell us what you want." Dave sure wouldn't be doing that. He'd be running. He'd be hiding under that bed. He'd be getting his gun out and shooting. He's scared of ghosts. "I want the cap your daughter stole," cried the ghost, his eyes blazing silver fire. Tiny lightning bolts raced up and down his white garments. Anya's parents cowered away from the terrible figure floating in wrath outside their window. Then the first ray of dawn crowned the hill behind the house, and the spirit vanished. Anya's father, Anya, I don't know which, raced to the room next door and dragged his daughter out of bed. "Where is the cap you stole from the ghost?" he shouted. Anya stared at him sleepily. "What do you mean, father? What ghost?" "The ghost outside your window," cried Anya's mother from the doorway. "That's not a ghost. That's Ivan," Anya said with a yawn. "He's playing tricks again." "Even that trickster Ivan cannot float 10 feet above the ground," her father said. "Now tell me where you put that cap." "I threw it in the river." "Honestly, what a fuss." "Threw it in the river? Ah, me, the ghost will destroy us when he finds out," cried the mother, wringing her hands. "Father, you must go for the priest." The mother scolded Anya soundly, while the father fetched the local priest and explained the situation to him. The priest stared gravely at the erring Anya, who glared back, annoyed by this unnecessary fuss. "You must come to the church now, and we will ring the bell for Mass so the good citizens can pray for your soul," the priest said. "If enough of us pray, the ghost may leave you alone." "What nonsense," grumbled Anya as her parents dragged her to the church. The priest rang the bell, and the local residents came to pray. The priest made Anya kneel in front of the altar while he read a prayer for the dead. Behind her, the good people of the town listened gravely, staring at the defiant girl who dared to face the dead. "Hey, Lex, doesn't she hurt me once? Would you grab me a couple of waters from the garage, please?"
Okay.
Meg. I'm thinking now, Anya sounds like a real joy. The priest made Anya kneel in front of the altar while he read a prayer for the dead. Behind her, the good people of the town listened gravely, staring at the defiant girl who dared to face the dead. All at once, a massive whirlwind blew in from the south. Black clouds darkened over the sky. The trees bent double in the blast, and then the church was shaken by a blow like that of a giant's hand. The doors blew open, and the whirlwind howled inside, tossing hymnals and Bibles and candles and icons to the floor. The walls shook, the stained glass windows shattered, and the congregation fell to the floor. At the altar, Anya gave a blood-curdling scream as the lights went out. if Isaiah wasn't going to sleep, I'd be really doing this up. Thank you. Let's see. All at once, the roaring wind and the earthquake stopped. A loosened portrait thudded to the floor in silence, and a candle toppled from its holder and rolled to the foot of the altar. The eyes of every person in the room followed the candle as it stopped at the empty railing where, moments before, Anya had knelt in a defiant rage. There was nothing there now, save a few long golden curls, a handful of silver buttons, and a bit of lace. Hey. Oh, I always, Davita, I have to have my water, but it's sparkling. Sometimes I want regular. Carolyn's not live yet, right? That one scared you, Nicole? What? You jumped a mile? No, you didn't. Well, felt like a ghost just knocked this. I don't know why I do this to get every drop. Cool looking dude. That's my cool looking granddaughter, Meg. But she doesn't care. Half the time she wants to look like a boy. She did have her hair shaved last summer for her open house. He likes, no, never mind. They'll let me know. I was going to say, would you look on your phone and see if Carolyn has a live set? Okay, Meg. Hi, Adventures with Beth. I bet. Did they do that with your name, Adventures with Beth? Hi, Shay. I haven't seen you for a while. We were wondering where you were. Oh, okay. One. Okay. So that would be 12 my time. Okay, we got some time then. Okay. Thanks, Nicole. Did it all on your own. Okay, this one's Chapter 7, Underground. We timed our visit to Oregon to coincide with the Pendleton Roundup and had managed to snag one of the very last hotel rooms in town. My husband, a big rodeo fan, was as excited as a little kid to be attending the famous Pendleton Roundup. Myself, I was eagerly anticipating a tour of the famous, or should I say infamous, Pendleton Underground. According to the literature I'd read prior to the visit, Pendleton was a small village first settled in the 1860s and thereabouts by a fellow named Goodwin. It was mostly a farming community that didn't begin to boom until prospectors found gold in the Blue Mountains. After this discovery, Pendleton became a stop for supply wagons, as well as an entertainment capital where miners could spend their hard-won gold and where cowboys and ranchers could come to drink and gamble in the 32 saloons, that's a lot of saloons, and visit one of the 18 bordellos. Chinese workers came in abundance to work in the mines and do business in town. They were not always welcomed by the general populace, so they burrowed underground and began digging tunnels from business to business, cellar to cellar, living and working in the tunnels they had dug. It was estimated that Pendleton's labyrinth of underground tunnels, dug by the Chinese between 1870 and 1930, wound for more than 70 miles beneath the town. Wow, that's a lot of tunnels. Therefore, through the years, the Pendleton Underground tunnels and rooms were used by Chinese workers, prohibitionists, opium addicts, ice cream stores, butcher shops, speakeasies. Oh, that's pretty. Thank you, video. Saloons, card parlors, and even a bowling alley. Rumors abounded. Does it, Meg? Rumors abounded about the underground. One story claimed that a pair of train robbers who used the tunnels to store their ill-gotten goods had died in the dark passages under an old house during a gun battle over the stolen gold. It was said that the ghosts of the robbers still haunted the place, and people could sometimes hear them crying, "It's my gold." I shivered in delight as I recounted the legend to my husband. Being pragmatic, he just laughed, but he did agree to accompany me on the tour of the Pendleton Underground. I picked up the phone at once and booked the very next tour. My husband laughed as I bounced on my toes in excitement and danced around the hotel room as giddy as a child. I was acting even sillier than he had on the first night of the roundup. After a quick lunch, we went to the tour headquarters and gathered with a large group of people, all interested in the story of the mysterious tunnels beneath our feet. I told my husband that we were probably standing over a tunnel right now. The tour guide heard me and confirmed that part of the Pendleton Underground was directly below us. I grinned in triumph. We watched a brief film, and then we were escorted outside. We walked around a corner and stopped so the tour guide could tell us a short story about the cowboys who had stood on that very spot and called up to the working girls in the rooms above our heads. I craned my neck upward, trying to picture the scene. Above me, something scarlet flickered in and out of view at the corner of my eye. I blinked and rocked back on my heels, chills running down my spine. For a moment, I'd stared into bold black eyes over a gaudily painted red mouth. The flash of scarlet had been dyed feathers, framing an attractive, heart-shaped face. I stared open-mouthed at the empty window above me until it was jostled by the moving crowd around me. Everyone else was walking down the steps beside me. The skin between my shoulder blades pricked with apprehension as I blindly followed my husband down the staircase. What had just happened? Had I imagined the face in the window? We went through a door and found ourselves in a cellar that once housed a saloon. I shivered as the temperature around me dropped more than 10 degrees. It was cold in here. I wished vainly for my sweater, left back in the hotel room as I stared at the recreated Old West scene. Cowboy mannequins lounged around tables and played cards, while our tour guide stood behind the polished bar and discussed the role of the saloon in the days of the gold rush. My husband was absolutely fascinated. I listened with half an ear as I poked around the basement room and looked at the exhibits, trying to imagine what it was like to drink and play cards underground, a lump of gold in my pocket and a gun at my side. The tour guide beckoned us onward, and I trotted obediently behind my husband, who was chatting eagerly with a rodeo enthusiast. When we entered a recreated Chinese laundry, I was hit with a wave of not quite nausea. I swayed as my eyes swam with strange, out of focus colors. My stomach flip flopped strangely. My spine went rigid, and the skin on my shoulders and arms prickled with goosebumps. For a moment, I could hear water swishing, and beside me, a man's voice said something in Chinese. I gasped and whirled, but no one was there. As suddenly as it had come, the nausea faded, and my head was clear again. The room swam back into focus, and I realized that the rest of the tour had moved next door into the recreated ice cream shop. I followed hurriedly. My husband motioned for me to keep up. Spooked by my experience, I stayed by his side as the tour guide discussed the use of space for ice cream storage and then took us through a doorway into a long underground room full of small cots and benches. The room was lined with windows that looked out onto a tunnel hallway lit by glassed in openings in the sidewalk above. The guide stepped into the room, which housed a demonstration of the famous Pendleton wool industry, and spoke knowledgeably about the exhibit. A loud buzzing, like the noise of a large drill, prevented me from hearing much of the talk. Some workman must be fixing an exhibit, I supposed. I glanced around in annoyance and whispered to my husband, I wish they'd stop drilling. He blinked in surprise and whispered back, what drilling? Then I realized the buzzing sound was only in my head. I shrugged, and my husband turned his attention back to the lecturing tour guide. Around me, the buzzing grew louder and became a flood of words and phrases in broken English and Chinese. My stomach turned over as strange bits of color flashed first here and then there in the room. For a brief moment, I saw an almost invisible Chinese man doing calculations on an abacus made of some kind of black wood. The hands, the only clearly visible part of the man, were rapidly moving red beads back and forth on little wooden bars. Come on, Sally, don't lag behind, my husband said impatiently, pulling at my hand. Instantly, my vision cleared, and I was back in the present. I staggered and clutched the wall for a moment. Then I followed my husband through the door and into the tunnel itself, which was constructed of dark basalt stones. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Smooth, fairly flat on the outside, and carefully mortared together. This story's boring. It's taken forever. I could see through the large windows right back into the room where we had just been standing. I glanced toward the place where I had seen the hands holding the abacus, shuddered once, and resolutely kept my eyes forward as we navigated around a corner and into the next area. We passed through a place where a thriving butcher's shop had conducted its business. I blinked cautiously as I looked around the room, but everything stayed in focus, for which I was grateful. It was fascinating to see the old posters advertising low prices of meat, the old-style cash register, and the cold room where the meat was kept. I was feeling much more myself now, having thrust aside the odd occurrences to think about when we were above ground. When are we going to get the word gasped again? Hi, Carol Clark. I never heard of that, Meg. Then I stepped into the next room, an old card room that had been used as a bar during Prohibition, and heard an alarm bell jangling desperately from somewhere overhead. In front of me was the recreated scene of a card party with rough-looking fellows sitting around a table. eyeing one another suspiciously. Gosh, how long is this one going to freaking go on? What time is it? I'm going to end this one. I don't like it. I don't know. If we ever get desperate, we can come back to it. Okay? I'll mark it. Who knows? It might turn out to be good, but somehow I doubt it. I think we all know what's going to happen. Okay, y'all. 15 hours later, I know, right? Oh, Jackie, sorry. Well, Carolyn's going to be going live in just a couple minutes. She's going live at 1 a.m. Eastern. Carol does the coolest things. It is boring, right? Yeah, I don't like it. She sends me such funny things. She's got the best sense of humor. In Slack, every now and then she'll send me something that just cracks me up, has me laughing so hard. The stuff she can come up. You'd be a great comedian, Carol. You have such a good wit. So, thank you guys for coming. Enjoy your night, your evening, your morning, your day. Okay. See you guys at Carolyn's. Okay. Love y'alls. We gotta go now. Oh, hopefully you will call in sometime, Carol. Love you too, Nicole. See y'all.